clean up the video on demand. So welcome to episode 10 of Winning with Death Guard. I have not done an episode in about 9 months because I wanted to wait until there was actually something worth talking about. And now that I've had the Codex for 4 months and I've been to a bunch of events, I thought about doing an episode as soon as the Death Guard Codex came out with my feelings about what was good or what wasn't or how to win with it. But I thought instead I would keep quiet for a few months and put my money where my mouth is and actually draw up a performance. And so today I'm going to be talking about Death Guard Codex in general, my feelings on the meta, including questions from the chat. I'm going to be talking about my run at the Salty Alliance Major recently, where I went undefeated with 5 wins and 0 losses, and I'll be going through each of those games play by play, including showing you the lists that I play against and some pictures from the games and walking you through what happened in the games and my decision playing pure Death Guard. Then I'm going to show you some other lists that I've used this season already to win a number of ITC Rogue Trader tournaments, and then I'm going to finish with taking questions from the chat and going through basically what I'm going to be trying to do for the rest of the season, types of events that I'm going to be trying to attend. And so I am glad that I waited a while to do an episode to kind of prove that, I mean, I've been playing at tournaments in 3rd edition, and everyone knows I love Chaos, but you could see here, let's see, where is it? Yeah. So this is my performance so far this season. I'm currently the number 2 Death Guard player. And if I'd gotten first at my event where I went undefeated, which is something I'll talk about later, I would already be back in first. But I'm going to be trying to claw back in with some larger events that I'm going to. But I'm very happy with my success so far. I'm 19 wins to 1 loss so far this season in open style ITC events. I went to an invitational with 8 people, but for normal things that normal people go to, I am 19 wins, 1 loss. And I'll talk about that 1 loss later. So I'm extremely happy with how things are going. It's a bucket list item for me to try to be best in faction one of the ITC seasons, and Death Guard is my favorite army. So that's what I am going for. Before I go any further, if you aren't already subscribed, there is in the corner down there, you could see I've got this little subscribe button, this red subscribe button. Please hit that if you aren't already subscribed. I don't charge for anything that I have on Instagram or Facebook or here on YouTube. I don't have a paywall. I answer questions for free when people message me on Facebook asking for advice. I don't have a subscriber, a contributors or paying subscriber channel. It's all free. The only thing I ask is that you subscribe and you share it with people because that's going to encourage me to keep doing more stuff. So with that plug out of the way, let me go into some thoughts that I have about playing Death Guard in general with the new Codex. And so, of course, new Codex came out. There it's popping up my chair a little bit in the background. And I had really mixed feelings about it when it came out. A lot of people who don't play Death Guard just assumed that the army got better. Yes and no. A lot of people at the beginning said, Mortarian's too good or the army's too good, which is kind of comical. Those are usually from very ignorant people who don't understand Death Guard and didn't really know the old Codex. The reality is Death Guard lost a lot of the things that were their biggest strengths in the old Codex. Like Foul Blightspawn went from 3 damage down to 2. Not as much of a point in taking multiple of them. The Foul Blightspawn Aura went from 7 to 6 inches, and now it's a relic. They lost their most important psychic power, which is Mortal Wounds on 6s, which used to be, it wasn't unmodified, so you could stack it with Veterans of the Long War or something. And so that dropped a lot of offense out of the army. Plague Burst Crawlers got much more expensive, and they gained a lot of good things as well, but it was a big trade-off. And then, of course, everybody who plays Death Guard knows now there's a lot of restrictions in the army about how, you have to take Plague Marines or Possessed or Terminators in order to take 1 Cultist or 1 Poxwalker. The Cultists lost the objective secured. Poxwalkers lost the ability to do actions. So there's a lot of limitations that you don't find in other armies. And then a lot of the Codex is poorly written so that The inexorable advance ability for vehicles doesn't work with any of the Death Guard specific vehicles. The Death Guard specific army rule only works with generic Chaos Space Marine vehicles. And a lot of Death Guard players that I've seen even on stream get that wrong. Like, a Plague Burst Crawler is not going to benefit from an Inexorable Advance. It's still going to get the -1 when it's shooting into melee. So that's really unfortunate. That also makes the secondary one of the secondaries that needs Bobotica start as keyword. It makes that one harder to achieve. And then you've got a whole bunch of other things like the FAQ came out. It kind of gutted their special rules so that you are slowed again by difficult terrain, which nobody really expected. So, and then of course, there's a few other things in there. So it is a good codex. It is a very well-balanced codex. But of course, if you are playing competitively and you want to do really well at very competitive events, especially the large ones, you don't want to play a well-balanced army, right? It's like when you're buying stocks or entering the real estate market, you're not looking for something that's fairly priced. You're looking for something that's underpriced, which is why a lot of people jumped on a Drukhari bandwagon because they're really underpriced. It's probably why a lot of people would jump on the Adeptus Mechanicus bandwagon because they're very underpriced for what they do for a lot of the really dangerous units. And so that's why Death Guard started at 55 or 58% win rate. Some of the top players, like Nick Nanavati, jumped on that bandwagon right away, did it for like 1 or 2 tournaments, and then kind of quit immediately. And you keep seeing Nick Nanavati trying to play it on Art of War against better armies like super reroll shooty armies or AdMech or whatever, and it doesn't go that well most of the time. Even when you soup, which is much stronger than pure Death Guard. So pure Death Guard as a codex is a very well-balanced codex, and if every other army in the game was as balanced, it would be fantastic. You know, some armies may be a little less strong, some a little more strong, and you would have good games. Unfortunately, you look at Drukhari and you look at Adeptus Mechanicus, and maybe a few other SKU lists that you can make with other older new codexes, and Sisters of Battle are looking very strong. Those aren't necessarily as balanced, right? Death Guard, everyone knows, they're very slow. They don't have a lot of strong range shooting for anti-tank or otherwise. They have those limitations I talked about. Their secondaries are not very good. All those things really hold them back. And then, inability to shoot things at range or inability to move quickly even hurts with a lot of the book secondaries that you would need to pick, like the new version of Scramblers that was just revealed, or the Engage in All Fronts, or something like that. Even something like just got renamed, but Psychic Ritual. So, that's nice, but you need to be within 6 inches of the center of the table. Well, if you're slow, it's hard to get that on the first turn unless you're doing it with Mortarion or something. So it's not that it's a bad codex, it's that it's a balanced codex, which if you're trying to win at the top tables is actually a challenge. You'd rather be playing with something that's overtuned or maybe with a really SKU list. And the same thing happened with Terminus Est. So we got our Army of Renown, but it's much more restrictive than anybody else's. It's not as good as the stuff that's in the same Warzone Charadon, but that's just an army supplement. Death Guard does not have just an army supplement like Cult of Strife for Drukhari. You can just make a detachment. It doesn't have to be your whole army. There's really no drawbacks. You could take all the good stuff in it, unlike the armies of Renown. And so I would like for Death Guard at one point to get a Codex supplement down the road because it seems to have all the goodies with no drawbacks. But, we'll see. We'll see about it. So those are my feelings on the Codex in general. Those are my suspicions when the book kind of first came out. I didn't realize how right I would be when I saw how strong Drukhari and now Adeptus Mechanicus would be, and how strong Sisters have been and continue to be. So we'll see what happens, but that's why I think you've seen the win rate drop from initially 55 or 58% out the gate to last time I saw it was like 52%. And 50% is considered perfectly balanced. And so what that really means probably is you're beating up on a handful of armies that are really bad consistently because they're very out of date, like Gene Stealer Cults or someone else that really needs a lot of help. And so I am worried about the Death Guard Codex falling off a little bit as we continue for those reasons. We will see what happens. It's a bit unfortunate that Chapter Proof just came out. I was hoping a number of things would get points drops, like the weapons on Plague Marines, or little things here and there like Typhus or bloat drones, rhinos. predators, a lot of things that if it was like 5 or 10 points cheaper, you could build totally different types of lists. And unfortunately, I think that just didn't happen. And so I'm really, really disappointed as a Death Guard player in this chapter proved. It did not bring into play any of the things that could easily have been brought into play with just a little bit of improvements. And I assume that's simply because a lot of armies that needed help or needed to be toned down weren't changed at all either. And I think they probably printed these a long time ago. COVID messed up their supply chain. They're way behind schedule on releasing codexes. And so they thought they'd have like 4 more codexes out right now. And so I think we're just going to have to wait another 5 or 6 months to see when they come out with the next release of new points. And until then, it is what it is. And what you have as Death Guard is what you have. And so those are my feelings on the Codex. Some people on my Facebook page have told me that I'm too hard on Death Guard. Well, that's not quite true. My feelings about that are a little bit more nuanced. And if you talk to other people who've tried playing pure Death Guard, TJ Lanigan at the event that he got banned at in his final game when he was live on stream, he was telling his opponent, there's really no point in playing Death Guard at all unless you soup in Warp Time and Death Hex and stuff and other things. And otherwise, you're just playing with, one arm time behind your back. Don Houston recently, he had some challenges with Death Guard, and he decided, I think he called it taking the weights off, the extra weights he was carrying. He souped in some stuff maybe for his next event. Playing with pure Death Guard is much, much harder than playing with Chaos Soup. And if the meta keeps tilting with some of this Codex creep, even though in theory they were all designed at the same time, what that means is it may get to the point where it's no longer tenable to play with pure Death Guard. You have to soup to even stay in the game. I hope that's not the case because I am trying to get, like I said earlier, I set myself the goal at the beginning of the season to get top Death Guard. I've got stiff competition from at least these 2 guys you see here, Mark Esht and Johnny Velasquez, and both of them can go to much larger events, higher attended events than I can, which makes it very difficult to compete. But I'm kind of, trying to be stubborn and just sticking with it. So those are my feelings about the meta in general, Death Guard in general, what I've experienced so far and going forward. So let me then go to what I promised, which is talking about a game-by-game analysis of the major that I recently went undefeated at. I went to the Salty Alliance major in Tooele, Utah. Tooele is maybe 40 minutes from Salt Lake City downtown. It's about an hour where I live, so I had to commute quite a bit each way. Ironically, if you look at the last episode I did for Warp Search Radio 9 months ago, it was also my first event of 9th edition. It was also in Tooele. So that's kind of interesting. And I happened to play there the guy in the first round, Rich Kilton, who is very well known, has won multiple majors, that I now played at this time, at this event, at this major, at the final game in the 5th round at the top table. So it's just kind of funny how things go, and it shows you that there's a lot of good players here in the Utah area and in Intermountain West. And so I was very lucky. I won the Renaissance Man, which is considered the top award for sportsmanship painting and competition. I did want to get first place. I got second by 1 battle point out of 500, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I was very honored to receive this award that they chose to give me, and I'm extremely happy with my performance at the event, at a large event. Let's throw up some pictures. So you see here, this was the venue. It was large. It was socially distanced, people wearing masks. It was great. We had a lot of people attend from nearby states, California, Nevada, Colorado. So I want to thank all the people who showed up. I want to thank Mario and Jonah and some of the other TOs who volunteered all their time to make this happen. And also all the people, including me, you see here at the bottom, you see some of my tables, which is kind of funny, where I donated my terrain for a couple tables. And it was a great event. Everybody had a good time. It was very well run. Mario really wanted us to have a good reputation for having Utah's first ever major. So it was very exciting. And it was nice to be able to do that, even though COVID is not totally gone yet. So let's take a look at some other photos here. Real quick, you could see here, we had, I think, 63 or 64 people in attendance. It was really awesome to see everybody come out. If you've never been to play at an event in Utah, I really recommend you come. We have a reputation for having a lot of good competitive players, but also being extremely friendly. I had 5 great games against 5 great people. The environment was really, really good. There was no drama that I could see, maybe occasionally at another table, but almost the whole thing went off without a hitch. We had a lot of first-time players. It was fantastic, and they're just doing a really great job of building community here. So let's go into my list. A lot of people will tell you, hey, just go on Best Coast Pairings, get a subscription, look at the list. But if I'm going to ask you to, watch an episode of this show, I'm going to make it a little better than that. So I went through the trouble of putting everything together in advance so that you don't have to go get a subscription to Best Coast Pairings. And you can, if you're watching this video on demand, you can pause anytime and look through these lists all right from this video to see what I played with at the major and what my opponents played with. So hopefully that's of some use and help to you. So here is the list that I played with at the event. I decided to go Harbingers. I think Harbingers has a lot of weaknesses, and most people prefer Inexorable or Ferryman, both of which are play companies that I've run. I do think they're more useful, but here for the specific situation and the specific meta in my area, this is what I chose to run. And so let me explain that to you real quick. If you look here, I'll start with this. So some events have let people run Typhus in a different play company. And the Atlantic City Open has its own FAQ that says specifically they're letting you do this. And I want to ask in my local area how the TOs feel about it. I'm kind of hoping that on Saturday when Chapter Proof comes out, where GW is going to give us a huge FAQ dump and maybe address this. But, considering the last FAQ barely said anything other than to nerf Death Guard, I'm not that optimistic, but one can hope. But because I wanted to take Typhus, I had to be Harbingers. I also want to take a lot of Poxwalkers for reasons I'll get to in a second. But this is nice because Typhus, one of the reasons I took him, not only because I wanted to have two casters to have more powers, and to have another deny, but his Destroyer Hive in the new Codex, in your command phase within 6 inches, you pick a unit, it does D3 mortal wounds. And in my area, what's very popular is spamming Catan, and also Ghazghkull is very popular. So this just gives you another way to do wounds in another phase, which is handy. I do think Typhus is a little overpriced. I think he should be 155, maybe 160. So that's a little bit painful. I don't like that from the 8th edition to the 9th edition, he went from hitting on 2s rerolling to hitting on 3s with no rerolls. He did gain an extra attack, even if you don't bring him in Terminus Est, but I still wish he was a little better in melee, but at least he's still flat 3 damage, so that's nice. And then he casts my buff powers, and then I've got this playcaster here who's there for mortal wounds. And so for 95 points, he's very cheap, and it's nice because these mortal wounds stack with his ability, which moved in the new Codex from 7 inches to 12 inches, which is very handy to just nearest unit, no line of sight, takes a mortal wound when you cast on a 7 or more. So that's really nice. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Here I've got these 4 units of Poxwalkers. I didn't have the points to make them all full, but as people probably know, Poxwalkers can do mortal wounds for 1 CP on a hit roll of a 6. Harbingers, the only good thing about them, other than being able to take Typhus without breaking your play company, if you go by raw in the Codex, is that they have a 1 CP stratagem to also reroll all to hit. So if you're willing to spend 2 CP and you've got enough Poxwalkers left alive and they're not too strung out to make it worth it to spend those 2 CP, you can burst out some mortal wounds. And so that means I've got some better units in here. And even if I don't want to do the mortal wounds ability, which can also hurt me, I can at least use the reroll to hit. And that is very good against things like Drukhari. So quite honestly, a lot of what's behind this list is, first of all, dealing with the fact that people like to spam Catan and Ghazghkull and similar units in my local area, partly intentionally to beat me from what some of those players have told me, which is kind of funny. I won a few too many Rogue Trader tournaments early on, and so then people started teching against my Mortarion list and against other things, and so I kind of got pushed into this. The other benefit being some of the Catan powers and the Plasmancers, which one of the players likes to spam as well, which also burst out mortal wounds from range, they hit the nearest enemy unit. And so If I move forward with Poxwalkers, I can absorb those mortal wounds. And the same thing when I play Aaron, who I think is in the chat. Smite, for example, is going to hit the nearest unit. So it just makes it easier, a little bit easier to live with the fact that Death Guard, I don't love the -1 damage they got in the new Codex. I would still rather have the old 5-up Feel No Pain, even though it's less reliable, because that was good against mortal wounds. And now you are a high toughness army that pays for high toughness that really doesn't have a defense against mortal wounds. So all you can do is try to screen. So this is not the type of list that I really like to be playing, but it's something I got pushed into, and it has worked well. I bring this 10-man block of Blight Lord Terminators, and a lot of people in the Death Guard Discord or other places really don't tell me that Blight Lords are bad. They tell me they're not worth the points. They're telling me I should take flails. I think they are all wrong. I think my record that I've had so far this season proves that I am right about this unit being a good unit for my playstyle at least, but I think a good unit overall, because a Blight Lord Terminator is 40 points, a Death Shroud Terminator is 50 points, but they have the exact same profile defensively. So you are paying 20% more for a Death Shroud Terminator for the same durability. So, and you can take these in the squad of up to 10, which has downsides, but it also means you're getting a much greater efficiency defensively out of Miasma for -1 to hit, and out of Vitality for the +1 toughness. So, what this does is it creates a unit that, if my opponent shoots at it, or tries to kill it in melee or whatever, they are attacking the most points efficient defensively unit in my army, right? This is going to be much harder to kill per point than my Death Shroud or my vehicles or other things in my army. So it's kind of in a way, a good situation if people shoot at it or attack it, because it's my toughest unit to kill for the points by far in the army, and probably in most armies. The other thing I do is a lot of people like to ignore it, which is a good strategy. But then I've got every 8 combi bolters and 2 Reaper autocannons. And so that means if they do ignore it, I do have a little bit of trouble with obscuring buildings in the way with the way the new edition rules work for terrain. But if I have line of sight to something, I'm able to put out a large amount of firepower, and high volume, low damage firepower is something that Death Guard struggles with, and so this unit helps with that. And if you see down here, I have a Tallyman with the Tollkeeper relic, and that gives me exploding 6s to hit on those 32 bolter shots and the 8 Reaper autocannon shots. The other thing I can do is Tallyman is going to give him +1 to hit, so I get more efficiency out of that, because it's not just in melee, I also make use of it in the shooting phase. And then, of course, then they're hitting on 2s with reroll 1s from Typhus. And the Reaper autocannons also help a little bit with taking care of annoying things like Smasher Guns or Ravagers or other things that Death Guard struggle with. And then I've got the Plague Skull on the Champion. A lot of games I don't get to use it because people avoid me. What this helps me with is sometimes people, rather than ignoring them, will try to tar pit them with tough units that have invulnerable save, like Lich Guard or something like that. The Plague Skull, or they'll just throw like some death unit at it, like Nightbringer or something that can only take a few wounds a phase. And since this is in the movement phase, that helps with that. Then you combine that with the fact that I've got this Plaguecaster behind them and Typhus for his Destroyer Hive and maybe a Smite. And suddenly, if I need a burst of damage coming out from that unit to get out of a tar pit, that's what that helps with. Otherwise, the unit does put out 31 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling, strength 6 without vitality, 1 damage, AP -2, and it's got a -1 toughness aura because I'm pure Death Guard, and so I'm usually wounding Space Marines on 2s re-rolling. So that's nice. And then I have with my Tallyman, I also have the Arch Contaminator. So if I spend a command point to make these Combi Bolters Plague Weapons, I reroll 1s to wound, reroll everything to wound within 12 inches. That's another unfortunate thing about the new Codex. Arch Contaminator range got nerfed to 12 inches, but it is what it is. And then, of course, behind them, I've also got the Revolting Stench Vats Relic Foul Blightspawn. So if I position right, if I get charged, I fight first. And then, of course, within 3 inches, I make someone fight last. I took the Living Plague Warlord trait extra that turns off auras on the unit within 3 inches. Any unit. It never came up the whole major, so I'm not sure if it's worth the command points. But then I just have straight up three-man squads of Death Shroud. I think they're not as defensively points efficient as Blight Lords, but they're more offensively points efficient. They give me more units around the board that I can do things with, which is handy. And that way, it's not just Poxwalkers on an objective. I have something a little more durable. And I do have this Reaper of Glorious Entropy on one of the champions. It's debatable whether this is worth taking, but the Death Shroud champion has just as many attacks with it as a Lord of Contagion, for example. So that's hard to say no to, I think. And then the last thing I have is these 2 Plague Burst Crawlers. I wish I could take 3. I wish Death Guard were a little cheaper because I would love to have a 3rd one in here. I debated constantly changing my list around, dropping some stuff to take a 3rd Plague Burst Crawler. They're very expensive. They're overpriced for the amount of offense they have. You can debatably say they're still worth it because they're quite durable defensively. It's hard to say. Vehicles really suffered from going from 5 up, feel no pain to -1 damage. But, it does at least fill a good void in the army. Another thing that comes up a lot for me is that line of sight ignoring mortar, that strength 8, AP -2 damage. A lot of times people will hide Gasgul or they'll hide those Catan behind buildings because, unfortunately, they can be obscured. And it's a real problem, especially with Catan, because they're going to be getting a wound back every turn from living metal. The mortars at least give me some ability to start chipping away at those units, especially if I do the 1 command point stratagem to try to make one of the mortars 3 damage. So that's kind of the thinking behind this list and why I took what I took. It looks simple, but there's a huge amount of thought behind everything that I have in here. Like, for example, obviously with all the restrictions in Death Guard Codex, you see that I have to take 4 Terminator units in order to take 4 Poxwalker units. And so this is a list that would be very difficult to modify. It's exactly 2,000 points with taking off a few Poxwalkers. And so that's the thinking behind the list. And I'll throw up a picture real quick just to show you what the army looks like, because I know otherwise people will complain that I don't have a picture of the army. So it's not the most beautiful picture, but at least it will let you see kind of what it looks like on the table. So there we go. You can see here, I use these little bands to distinguish the Poxwalker squads. That's to keep me sane and to keep my opponents sane because, 1, I don't like to mess up the bases or use weird markers on them. And 2, that's really hard for my opponent to see. Here, my opponent and I can see really easily. It's easy for my opponent to say, I'm shooting at the pink squad or I'm shooting at the yellow squad. It saves everybody time. It avoids headaches. It avoids arguments. So, Geek Abaddon, happy to explain. I was worried I was going too much into detail, but a lot of people have asked me on a lot of different Facebook pages and message boards and other places to explain my list, and so I went into that. And one thing... Let me go on a quick tangent. As I was playing at this event, and I've used this list at a Rotator tournament a week or 2 earlier, I thought, okay, this list, people probably don't understand why I built it the way I did, just looking at it. And 2, even if you know why I built it the way I did, and even if they watch this video and see how I played it, it doesn't mean they necessarily can play it well. I think this is a very difficult list to play. I think it's a difficult list to win with. I think it's effective when used correctly, which I demonstrated by going 5-0. But I kind of laughed, wondering if my result at this event is going to lead to people trying to copy it and doing badly. And I don't know if he's watching right now, but the guy I played in the 3rd round, who's a really nice guy from Nevada, he messaged me yesterday and kind of complained. He said he copied my list, went to a Rotator tournament, had no idea what to do with it, went 1-2 with it, and now he's upset that he's locked into it for the Atlantic City Open. So I just laughed really hard because that's kind of exactly what I expected. I'm going to give away some of my tricks and tips and tricks and little strategies here when I go through the rounds, and then maybe people have a better idea of why I won my games. But it's still, there's a difference between hearing something explained to you and being able to do it under pressure when you've got multiple options. And so just because you copy this list doesn't mean you're necessarily going to go win a big event with it. I think just like with Orks, Death Guard is an army where player skill makes an immense factor because you've got some big strengths and big weaknesses, and you're some ways always trying to win uphill in kind of an asymmetrical way that's very different from how your opponent's army works. And so this list is really even more that way probably than your average Death Guard army. So yeah, I agree, Ed. Net listing is not a great way to go for any event. With a really over top army like Drukhari, you can do it. I've heard about people who just copy a standard Drukhari list and they go from usually being last to being like first or something like that. But you cannot do that with Death Guard. You definitely cannot do it with this list. I've been playing in tournaments in 3rd edition. I've been playing in tournaments for over 20 years. I played Death Guard in all of 8th edition when they were terrible almost the entire time. I've gone to LVOs with mostly Death Guard armies when they were really bad and played uphill. And so I'm used to playing with both hands tied behind my back, and I learned how to use the units pretty well and have faith in what they do. And you can't just replicate that, I think, overnight, especially not with an army like this. So let me then go into the matches that I played. So I'm gonna go through and show you the list that I played against, and then I'm going to just throw a picture of the game at some point during the game, and I'll walk through roughly what happened during the game. I'm hoping this is of value to people because the Salty Alliance Major was not streamed, which I'm glad for. I think streaming has a lot of downsides. It doesn't benefit anyone who's at the event. It only benefits people at home who didn't pay to attend the event and didn't travel out for it. And so I think life is better for the participants without streaming, even though I'm happy to watch a stream of somebody else. And so, but this means I can give people a little bit of an idea of what I went through at that event. So let's pull up the. I'm going to preload a little picture here, and then I'm going to switch over in Word. I am going to load the next little army that I played against. Let's do that here. We'll open this here, and so that should switch over. It doesn't appear to be. So let me close this real quick and pull it back up a different way. Screen capture, window capture. Here we go. I know why I messed up. Okay. But there you go. Here is the list I played against in the first round. I played against Chris Morgan, who is well known from being one of the members of the Forge the Narrative podcast. He is also known for being one of the main TOs, volunteer TOs at the Las Vegas Open, and he invests quite a large amount of time in volunteering the last year to help develop the ITC Code of Conduct for players for punishing poor behavior or other things that people might do. So he does quite a lot for the community, but he had not played that many games of 9th edition. He also came in and told me he only got 3 hours of sleep the night before driving out all the way to Tooele, Utah, because he has a young baby at home. And so I was very sympathetic. I tried to walk him through some stuff. I spent a lot of time before the game explaining my army because I figured he hadn't played against it before, just because I wanted to give him, a fair shot at this game, and realizing he was really tired. He just ran, his kind of whatever Blood Angels list that is stuff he likes, that he's used to playing with. It has a lot of good stuff. It's got this Null Zone Librarian that's very scary for all my 4-up and vulnerable safe Terminators. He's got this Captain with a whole bunch of stuff on him. He turns off OBSEC. He gives OBSEC. There's a lot of crazy stuff that my list was not really designed to deal with. Turning off obstacle and poxwalkers. He had this priest bringing guys back for that one command point. Every time I see an apothecary, I cry because the plague surgeon is so bad. And I'd hoped in a new codex they would make the plague surgeon good, and they didn't. We can't bring guys back. Just really, really makes me sad. And now he's overpriced to 75 points, which is another thing GW did not fix in the FAQ. So it is what it is. Not like Games Workshop is going to listen to me. Then he's got these incursors and these intercessors. And then he's got some Blade Guard, 4 of them. He's got a big squad of Death Company with jump packs and some Thunderhammers. He's got a Judicar, Make Me Fight Last. He's got this Ancient with the icon of the Angel, which does a bunch of stuff. He's got these 2 Sanguinary Guard squads, and then he's also got this little Interceptor squad full of plasma. And so, and then he's got an Impulsor so that he can follow his jump pack guys, move out really far with the Impulsor, and the guys could still get out after it moved within 3 inches. And so the funny thing is, you often hear high-level people say, you heard this a lot at some of the recent super majors that people attended, it is actually often more difficult to win your first or second game than it is to win your later games, even though you're playing against much tougher lists by much tougher players, because in the first round or 2 where you're kind of matched randomly or semi-randomly, you will get weird stuff that you are not at all expecting, that you're not used to. That might be a skew list. It might just be something you have not seen. The person might play it in a weird way that you're not expecting. By accident, they might just play differently than what you'd expect them to play. And this is one of those. So I was actually worried about losing this just because it's like, what do I do against an army that has no vehicles for me to shoot? The whole army moves quickly, almost the whole army. You can run across mine. We're playing on a deployment where we deploy it along the long edge, so he can just run away from me. He can really stack up everything of his in one little area. And just presented a really difficult puzzle for my list. And he's certainly got the power to chew through all my Poxwalkers and even all my Terminators with doing things like turning off Invulnerable Save. So that was going to be kind of tricky for me to play against. So I'm being told that the lists are a little difficult to read. I thought they were large, but let me then just bold it here and just go through it one more time for anyone watching on video on demand, just to make it a little easier to see here all the HQs, all the troops here, and then also all the elites. Like I said, just a huge amount of things that are very, very melee oriented, that all just they stack in buffs. It would have been great to have Mortarion here for a long-range Living Plague to turn all that off, but I have my little 3-inch guy. So it is just what it is. And so let me show you then a picture of the... Let's see. Let me make sure this is right. I will load a picture here so you can see what happened during this round 1. Let's see if this is, yeah. So here is the table that we played on. You can see here we did long ways deployment, 2 in each, basically deployment zone, 2 in the middle and 2 in the back. What happened here is Chris deployed very heavily on that middle one and the one you see in the top left with his whole army, and he just had a token amount on the building you see on the far right in his corner. I deployed very evenly across my whole deployment zone because I didn't really know how he was going to deploy. I didn't really want to go first, but I did go first here. He was pretty hidden, but he did have this Death Company that was spread out, probably to give him an option of where to move, really between that middle building and the building in the top left. And so some of them were out in the open, and then, of course, some of them I could hit with mortars. And so, and then I started my Blight Lords in the middle building, and I moved out. And so I very carefully, with target priority, shot one after another, my Blight Lords, my Plague Burst Callers, to get the max amount of shots on things that I could hit within line of sight. And I did a lot of damage. I think I killed maybe 4 or 5 of the 10 Death Company on the first turn, even with some saves and cover and all that. So that was very handy for me. And then he made the decision to skew very heavily with his whole army, basically, towards the objective that you see there in the middle left that I advanced onto. And with the extra movement of the Impulsor and getting his special super captain guy out of the Impulsor, he was able to get within range of my Poxwalkers and turn off their OBSEC while granting it to like Death Company and things like that. And so he took that objective from me. So at that point, I knew I would have to go get him. And the rest of the game was a weird slog in over that objective there in the middle left, where he had basically his whole army there. They were all kind of cramped together. They're in range of the Judicar. They're in range of other things. And I had to very carefully, he came in and kind of shot up one squad of Poxwalkers, and then came in and consolidated into the other squad of Poxwalkers. And then I popped both of my stratagems, did some mortal wounds, finished off that little unit. I think it was like, I don't remember what it was. It was like a little Sanguinary Guard unit that I probably also damaged in the first turn. And then I moved up that little squad of Death Shroud there and the surviving Poxwalker squad and kind of strategically attacked into his clump of stuff to start chipping away at Intercessors and Death Company and other things. Unfortunately, he kept having characters live with 1 or 2 wounds, which really hurt me. But I was then slowly trying to get my Blight Lords and supporting characters from the middle over there to try to take that objective from him, while also pushing hard up the other flank where he had almost nothing to hold me back. So I was able to do a lot more damage to him than he expected in shooting and melee. He tried to counter by, on that crater you see there on the left, or just behind it, he dropped in his Plasma Intercessors. I had tried to drop in and make a long charge with some my squad of Death Shroud Terminators that I had in reserves. They failed it, but I just wanted to be there also to block out his deep strikes. And so when he came down, he shot at them. I think I had like one guy left, the guy with the Relic Scythe. And then he charged me later, and he kind of bounced off of me, and I did a lot of damage to him with that flat 3 Relic Scythe, because those Plasma Intercessors have 3 wounds each. And so that kind of worked out for me the same way it worked out for him, that some of his characters stayed alive. And eventually, with the Poxwalkers and some Death Shroud and the Blight Lords finally getting over there, I was just able to overwhelm him. And so it looked dicey for a while, but things ended up working out for me. I had enough punch to kind of kick him out. And at that point, basically, there wasn't much left to do in the final turns. And so ended up winning that game. Let me see. And if you're curious what secondaries, I usually don't focus that much on secondaries because I tend to always take the same ones. But I have it saved here in ITC battles. So let me just tell you what that was real quick. Yeah, so in that first game, he took Assassinate, Deploy Scramblers, and Oath of the Moment. I kept him from getting to deploy Scramblers. He couldn't get in at my characters to assassinate them. I took While We Stand We Fight, which is my Blight Lords, my 2 Plague Burst Crawlers. I took Raise the Banners, and I took Assassinate. And I ended up getting almost everything. I ended up winning that game 99-30. So that was my first game. Let's take a look at the second match that I played then in the Major. I will pull up here the correct list. So let's open the... it's too bad that they can't just save this. Let me turn this off real quick. Here we go. The second game that I played was against Orks. It was against James Davis, who is one of the captains of my team, Lightly Salted. And so let me bold this again since that was a request. And so here you go. Here is the second list that I played against. James Davis, very good Orc player, top 3 Ork player right now in the world and the ITC rankings. I have played against him in finals rounds of RTTs locally, and here I hit him already in the second event of this match. And so he played Goffs, which was very smart. It's good against what I brought. He had the big mech and mega armor with all the usual upgrades, 4 up invulnerable, 4 damage claw, great against killing Terminators, Gazgul, the weird boy with the jump, and Warphead. He has these 3 squads of boys, and the reason, Goffs are good, besides all the usual good stuff they get and the extra benefits from Gazgul, is he can spend 1 command point, make them all strength 5. So they go from wounding my Poxwalkers on 4s to 3s, and they go from wounding my Terminators from 5s to 4s, which makes a very big difference. You've got the usual you've seen a lot of Ork lists, the Commandos to deep strike in for scramblers or contesting backfield objectives, the Pain Boy, the Knob Banner for stringing stuff out for buffs, and then he takes the stuff that I hate, the Big Mech with the custom force field in the Grot Mob special detachment, where you spam Smasher Guns, which until Drukarian Admech was the most undercosted unit in the game. Unfortunately, in Chapter Proof, it is still undercosted. By the way, if you're wondering if Chapter Proof changed anything for Death Guard, I saw the Italian leak earlier. Everybody told me there were no changes, and from what I could tell, there were no changes. So, same thing for the Smasher Guns, unfortunately, from what I saw. These, of course, are good because you get D3 shots, blast, for 40 points, which is criminal. They hit on 4s, which is really good for something this cheap. And if you take this detachment, they reroll once to hit. And if you have more than 5 models in a unit, which includes my Blight Lords, you automatically get the full 3 because of that poorly thought out component of 9th edition where you get the minimum, which makes sense if you have D6 that you get 3 shots at least. But when your max is already 3 and you've got multiple of those, getting 3 as soon as there's more than 6 or more models in a unit is not that balanced, I feel like. But it is what it is. It really benefits the Smasher Guns. And of course, they're easy to wound with because they just have to roll equal to or higher than your toughness. And your average roll is 7 on 2 dice. So 4, 5, even 6 toughness with vitality is very easy to wound against most of the time. And so these are always a big problem. He kind of spammed as many almost as possible. And they're just very tough to deal with. They're D6 damage each. And so if you can imagine if you have 12 of them, that is 36 shots automatically at my Blight Lords. And then, of course, you can get extra shots because Orks get the Daka rule for 6s, so it can be more than 36. So very, very difficult to deal with. So that is that list. Very, very tough matchup against a very good player. So let's look at a picture from that event. So here is that match. You can see here, this was a very tactical game. It was very cat and mouse. He had some Smasher Guns on one side, some Smasher Guns on the other side. That's because of when I beat him in the final round of a Rogue Trader tournament, I dropped a Blight Bombardment or Orbital Bombardment on them when they were all in one parking lot, so he split them up this time. I made the decision that I don't normally like to do, which is Deep Strike Typhus and my Blight Lords, in the hopes of chipping away at some of the Smasher Guns before my Terminators came in. That didn't work out that well, but what it did allow me to do is it allowed me to put all these obscuring runes in the middle between the other Smasher Guns on the other side that I was not shooting at with my Plague Burst Crawlers, which were on the other flank. And so in this game, I was happy to just kind of sit on my objectives at the beginning and push up very slowly, and then just chip away at his Smasher Guns on the flank I wanted to push on with my Plague Burst Crawlers and with another Blight Bombardment. I didn't have very good luck shooting at them, but I was able to just slowly whittle them down over the course of the game. I did have my Terminators come down and do a lot of damage in shooting, as they tend to do. And he had Gazgul just kind of sitting in the back there because he didn't want to get shot by the Plague Burst Crawlers. He also didn't want to move up too much because then I attack him with Poxwalkers or other things. So I think he was in a tough position where he was hoping to just come on the other flank, which he did. And he gave me a lot of trouble there. You could see his yellow guys fighting my Blight Lord, my Death Shroud, and other things. And so that's where I ended up teleporting my my relief squad, my relief pitchers of Death Shroud in reserve as well, to help save that flank, put pressure on his objective, and put pressure on his other smasher guns and draw some fire. And then he eventually just had to come at me with Gazgul because otherwise he was just going to die from shooting. And so I just slowly pushed my way up that flank very carefully. I didn't charge until it was the right moment. I ended up being able to kill Gazgul with all the different things I have and just slowly chip away at his boys. He then, with his last little bit of boys he had left from his 3 big squads, used the Green Tide, brought him in my bottom right corner that you see there, and tried to take that objective from me. It would have helped him a lot, would have lowered my points a bit, but I still would have won the game. But he failed that 9 charge even with a reroll, and so that was kind of that. So it was a tough match, but I managed to play it to minimize the amount of damage that he could do to me. And in that match, I had picked Thin Their Ranks, I had picked Raise the Banners, and I had picked Assassinate, and he had picked While We Stand We Fight, Raise the Banners, and Domination. Because I wasn't able to get to that many characters, I, in the end, was not able to get... I only got 9 Assassinate, and I made a critical mistake that game that actually cost me winning this major, which is because I was deploying very differently in Deep Striking Normal, I forgot to put a character near my middle deployment objective to raise the banners, and so that's 4 or 5 points that I lost that game that I would have gotten if I just started in the right position. And it's because I was so fixated on where I might bring in the Terminators. And so that's a painful mistake for me. It's just one of the downsides about having Poxwalkers is that you can't raise the banners or do other actions. And so that's really, really, really unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I just have to live with it. But I was happy to win this game nonetheless, 84 to 51, and it was a tough match. So that is that game. Let's go then to the third one that I got to play. And I will bring out the new list of what I played in the third round. Third round, I played against Chaos. Against Joshua Jen, who is a very nice player from Nevada. I mentioned him earlier. So here you can see what he brought. He brought Chaos Soup, kind of some things you see quite a bit. First was Thousand Suns Attachment, Cult of Duplicity, which was interesting. He had this Exalted Sorcerer, which I'm glad to see they've gone down a lot in points over time. They're actually not bad now. He got the CP regen. He's got the +1 to cast. He has the Warp Time. He has the Prescience. Cultists, and then he has these Leviathan Dreadnoughts. I don't have Forge World Dreadnoughts, but they do a lot of work. The usual Volkite Calivers, which people thought would go up in chapter proof, but because GW will go digital and balance things right on time, these I don't think got touched. So these just do a lot of shooting. He gives them reroll to 1s because they don't have the Codex yet. Well, even if they did, I guess they would still probably be core. And then he can give one of them Prescience. So that's kind of scary. It's a good amount of shooting. And then he's got Mortarion. And then on top of that, he's got a Great Unclean One to heal Mortarion and with the random Exalted traits. And he's got the Lord of Change. It's not the Warlord, so it doesn't have -1 damage, but it does have the 3-up Impossible Robe, and it does also have random Exalted traits. And so he got really almost everything he was looking for. This guy could give extra CP, and he got the Deny a Power, Delete a Power, which was really tough for me to figure out how to deal with. And then here he got the Vomit, which he really wanted, which was pretty good for this Exalted trait, and he ended up getting the +1 Toughness, so he's Toughness 8, which was also a bit tricky. Then he had just all these Nurglings for OPSEC objectives. And so it's just kind of a list with 2 Dreadnoughts in the back shooting a lot, and I can't really shoot them because I have to worry about Mortarion and a Great Unclean One and the Lord of Change all up in my grill. And then he's got the Nurglings on the objectives. So let me show you a picture from that. Here you can see how we started off the beginning of the game in this third round at the major. So what he did is I really wanted to go first, and he ended up getting to go first, which was painful. We did the corner deployment, which led to a really interesting match. I don't know how this would have gone with something different. He, of course, had Nurglings at all 3 of the objectives that were in either corner. I tried to deploy to minimize the amount of damage that he could do with some psychic stuff or charging. I tried to screen myself a bit while also putting myself an objective in range to move out onto the objectives. He unfortunately got to go first, and what he ended up doing is he got off all the powers he wanted except Miasma of Pestilence, which I think I was able to deny on Mortarion, but he was able to move Mortarion into that middle objective and then warp time him right over my lines, right behind those yellow and pink Poxwalkers. And then he charged this Plague Burst Crawler to remove my anti-big unit shooting, and it was one of my Where We Stand, We Fight targets. And so he was able to get up everything he needed. He was able to do that, and it was going very well for him. Then on my turn, I charged him with the blue Poxwalkers and those Death Shroud that are hiding in the building right next to the blue Poxwalkers. That's not really what I wanted to do, but that's what I had to do. And of course, I had all my my Blight Lords there nearby. I had my Foul Blight spawn. I had everything kind of in range. I had to move outside of the 9 for the denying reroll thing that he had, but then still be within 12. So that was a little tricky, moving into the building and doing that and having line of sight. But with everything I had there, I was able to put 15 wounds on Mortarion on my then bottom of turn 1, which put him down to 3, which he really was not expecting. And then, meanwhile, I was moving my Blight Lords into position in that building that they're in right there on the middle left, because he then had his Great Unclean One and his Lord of Change holding that objective along with the Nurglings. And so I then got into the position where I was starting to fight his big nasty units in the middle with my some Poxwalkers, but mainly with Typhus and with my Blight Lords. And so I got really unlucky on some of the stuff like the Plague Skull and some of my 2 wounds. There was a point where he then had to roll like, I don't remember what it was, like 14 3-up invulnerable saves, and he made all 14. But in general, I was really chipping away at him. He was surprised how much damage I could do with the Blight Lords with Arch Contaminator. And so that made him then make the decision to do something a bit weird. You can see here from another angle, he decided to use the Cult of Duplicity special power, which I didn't realize you can also use on things like Dreadnoughts. And so he teleported, you see here at the bottom of the screen, this Dreadnought over to my corner, basically, which also I think got him some engage points. And then I had my Tallyman away more than 3 inches from a nearby unit, and so he tried to kill my Tallyman, giving the Arch Contaminator. If I'd been smarter, I could have fixed that by 2 command points, throwing Cloud of Flies on the Tallyman. I keep forgetting you can do that with characters, but I ended up not needing it. You know, he didn't roll that well. I rolled okay. I have the -1 damage, and so I ended up taking only like maybe 2 wounds out of 4 on the Tallyman. And it so didn't work for him. Although it did put me in a tough position with that Plague Burst Crawler in the back and figuring out what to do. I ended up having enough firepower and other stuff to eventually take that guy out. I eventually killed the Lord of Change in the middle, and then I kind of killed the that other Great Unclean One there, the Great Unclean One that was exalted, and I just wore it down with just having a lot of consistent damage over multiple turns, being stuck in the middle, and I just kind of grinded it out. And so in this game, I chose as my secondaries, let's see here, he chose with his army Engage on All Fronts, which he got 9 on, While We Stand We Fight, which he ended up not getting because I ended up killing Mortarion, and the Lord of Change and the Great Unclean One. And then Psychic Ritual, this is another area where I got unlucky. He kept only getting like a 4 or 5 on it, and I kept failing to deny. So he got all 15 on that. I got Direct Assault, because that's a good mission secondary here. I got all 15 on that, because he killed a Plague Burst Crawler, turn 1. I failed on enough invulnerable saves. Another 5 points that I lost, which again hurts when I ended up not winning the event by 1 point. But I did again get 15 on Domination, so I won this one 95-64. And so it was a very good game. I think he was very surprised by what Alice could do. But you have to, of course, play it right. And I made the right calls in this game, fortunately. Let me then bring up my game 4 so we keep moving right along through these games. And let me pull up here the next list that I played against. This was round 4. It was against another teammate of mine. It was against Derek. And he and I have played before at local RTTs. He's very good. He will probably end up pretty high, if not first or second, by the end of the season as Custodes. So we have a lot of best in faction players for a lot of different armies that were in attendance here. So let's see here, pulling up the list that he ran. Here we go. So here is that list. Derek Holder, Custodes. He was Shadow Keepers. He brought Trajan. He brought a shield captain with a huge amount of different upgrades there that you can see on him, including the 5-up Feel No Pain, which makes him really tough when he already has like 7 wounds, if I remember right. He's got these 3 kind of troop guys, 3 squads of 3. He's got these super Terminators that have like 4 wounds each and hit really hard and have a bunch of stuff. The hard part about those is they've got a stratagem that I think is a little too good for 1 CP. It turns AP 1 and 2 into AP 0. And that's really good, obviously, against the Blight Lords because their axes are AP 2. And then he's got this Dreadnought. I think this just went up in points because it's really good. This is also really good against me because it has a pretty good shooting, some good shooting that is high damage, but in melee, it has its weapon is 3 plus D3 damage, so it automatically kills Terminators through the invulnerable save, and it has reroll to charge. It has an extra attack, and of course, he's got the stratagem with whatever the guy is. Here he is, the Vexillus Praetor, who gives the -1 hitting and shooting, which is very good defensively. But there's also the Custodes stratagem. You can deep strike within 6 inches of him, wholly within 6 of him, but then you can be like 3.1 inches outside enemy units, so you really can't fail the charge. Then he's got these 2 cheapo things that do a lot of shooting. They're good against my Poxwalkers. He's got this other squad of these 4 Gempike guys that can spend, I think, 1 or 2 command points and double their shots, so they're very good. They're very mobile. And then he's got this Graph Tank that has more shooting. So this is a tough list to play against. Death Guard are good into it because they've got the -1 damage against a lot of damage 2 things, and all the AP on all the shooting is wasted, but he can still get kill through my army. And he's got a lot of shooting, a lot of melee, a lot of mobility. So in a lot of ways, he kind of edges me out. And I knew he was going to want to probably put these Custodians with the stratagem and this Dreadnought into my Blightlord block. So that's kind of what I was then dealing with in this match. And so I can show you here a picture. Here you see what that army looked like. It's got a little display board. It's quite nice. And you see there the little 3-man units. And the other thing that really, every time I play him, I'm surprised by this. Those 3-man guys of the 3-man troop units are really annoying because they've got like a flat 3 bolter with long range, and they've got a rapid fire, more shot version, and it can fire both and still be hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s. So that's really annoying. That's really hard for me to deal with. I can only imagine how bad it is for other armies without the -1 damage to have to deal with that. And so, you can see why Derek does so well with events. It shows you that between the fact that the army is very solid, they have all these extra Forge World units, and then Psychic Awakening gave them a ton of great strats that are only 1 or 2 CP for like any situation you can imagine. And that does make it kind of hard to play against this army. So I knew I had to play very clever, and I had to play very asymmetrically. And here you can see in our game kind of what that looked like. This was a very tense game where you were both being very, very careful. It was a lot of high-level play. In this match, and again, this is the second day now. This is round 4 of the major. I advanced pretty equally everywhere. I kept my Blight Lords much further back than I normally would. I kept them in cover. I kept them under protection of Foul Blight Spawn, and it was a lot of back and forth and a lot of dancing. I made a mistake here, choosing not to put stuff on the middle bottom objective that you see there, turn 1. Cost me 3 points of domination, which would really hurt me in the end. So that was a stupid mistake on my part. Other than that, I just try to move up everywhere to put pressure on these objectives. This particular mission, a lot of people don't like it. It's hard to play. There's not a lot of good secondary options, especially for Death Guard. I went first. I tried to put some damage on some things. I didn't finish some things off. But I just started chipping away at stuff with more damage 3 mortars and with entropy cannons. In this game, he ended up pressuring that bottom side you see there with his shield captain and 1 or 2 surviving troop unit guys, and then those 4 jump pack guys. And I was able to do a good amount of damage to them and shooting. And then he ended up attacking kind of everything I had there at the bottom, really whittling away at the Poxwalkers. I tried to do some mortal wounds back on him with the stratagem. It helped, but didn't do quite enough. What I really did here is that other side that he was pressuring, he ended up not really moving his troop guys to move on it. He tried to pressure it then. I mean, he did a little bit, but I think what he really wanted to do was pressure it with deep strikes. And so he probably may not have been expecting me to keep my Blight Lords in the middle because they're not near any objectives. So I kept them there to kind of move wherever I needed the most help. And then kind of maybe bring Deep Strike in some Death Shroud on the other side where I need a little less help, which is what I ended up doing. I knew that he probably wanted to use the stratagem to Deep Strike his Dreadnought and his Terminators to basically auto-charge into my Blight Lords. So I ended up having to make a very difficult decision with what was happening on my bottom flank there that you see near the dice tray. Do I use those pink Poxwalkers to fight more for that objective to make sure I take it? Or do I sacrifice them to save the Blight Lords and put pressure on the other objectives? So there's like a multi-step sequence here to my thinking that I had to do here without using up too much time on the clock and make decisions quickly. And so what I ended up doing is, because I kept my Blight Lords back like that, he had not brought in his Super Terminators or his Dreadnought from reserve. And so then on my top of turn 3, I used the Dead Walk Again stratagem to put some extra Poxwalkers back into Pink Squad, move them, like with reanimation protocols for Necrons, closer towards his deployment zone, get some extra movement. Then in my movement phase, I moved them all towards his deployment zone, and then I charged into a unit he had on that bottom objective. But what some people don't realize is that charging is a little different than in different editions. When you pile in or consolidate, you do have to move towards the closest unit, but that's not necessarily the case for charging. So when I charged, I was able to use with all the extra movement I then got more movement, and I strung my whole Pink Squad in an L shape across that bottom objective, but also through that middle rune on the right that you see in his. And so I moved them very far with a huge string. And what that did is, on his start of turn 3, on the second, bottom of turn 3, he had to bring in his deep strikes, but now I had blocked out pretty much everything except all the way to the middle of his deployment zones for him wanting to deep strike in if he wanted to be anywhere close to fighting for the other objective that I was starting to move my Terminators to in the top middle. And so I think that completely ruined his whole game plan, because then he had to bring in his Terminators way in the back and his Dreadnought kind of in the back. And so his Dreadnought then ended up charging some Death Shroud I had on the top middle objective. The guy lived with one guy lived, did some good damage back, kept him from taking that objective, kind of collapsed his game plan. Next turn, I just moved in with my Blight Lords into that top middle, took it from him, killed the Dreadnought. At that point, he's running away because I have a lot of shooting out of those Blight Lords. On the bottom, he's trying to salvage that, but I have a few things. I'm taking that objective from him. And I think his whole game plan just slowly starts to kind of fall apart. And so Derek's a very good player, but I pulled out a few tricks, and I made some mistakes, but he did as well. And then in the end, I was just able to edge him out. So in the end, on that game, I won 90-49. I did deny myself stupidly those 3 domination points, but I did have Vital Ground. Like I said, some people don't like this mission because Vital Ground is hard to get. I did end up getting 8 at Vital Ground. I got 15 while we stand we fight and 12 domination. He got 9 engage on all fronts because I had a hard time killing his jump pack guys, but he only got 3 grind them down because even with killing Poxwalkers, I was just taking stuff from him here and there, and he only got 2 Vital Grounds. So I ended up winning that match 90-49. Okay, so those are the first 4 matches of that major. Now let's go into the final game that was for all the marbles, which is a really great game. I'll show you first real quick what that list was. My final game was against Rich Kilton, very well-known player. And Rich and I have played many times at many Rogue Trader tournaments, at many GTs. You can see my game against him in in my episode from 9 months ago, when we did a little Rogue Trader tournament and we played in the first round. I had beaten Richard recently leading up to this major, and so he'd been trying a bunch of different things, including the custom Stampa from Evil Sons with all the rerolls. That's a little silly. So I didn't know what he was going to bring, but usually if he brings a skill list like that, it's hard for me to beat, but then he could lose to something weird, like I think he lost to a triple Riptide list or something with that, if I remember right. And so, but when Rich brings a normal list that he just plays that's similar to what he's been playing for years, it is very, very difficult to beat Rich. And unfortunately, that's what he brought this time. He just brought a straight-up normal list, and so he was 4-0 going into the final match, just like I was. I think I was first, and then he was second. And so let me pull up that list here so you can see Rich's list. And this is very, very similar to what he's tended to play over time. So here's his list. You see here a lot of the very popular stuff. He brought Death Skulls. He brought the Super War Boss with all the good stuff for the flat 4 damage. Very scary Determinators. He brought double Weird Boys, so he can give all the extra attacks. He can do the jump. He can buff Gazgul. He brought these 3 squads of boys, 2 30-man, 1 10-man. He brought this 20-man aggression squad for broad shield or just holding objectives. The double commandos everybody likes to take. The Pain Boy didn't have a knob banner, but didn't really need it. He likes to take Def Comptas for objectives. These are really good for 35 points. It's a smart play. And then he brought these Storm Boys, which were new to his list. They can just move really fast and charge, or he can deep strike down. And so it's not just 10 Commandos, it's also 10 Storm Boys you have to worry about. And then he brought mech guns, not as many as James spammed against me in the earlier game, and they are not in the specialist attachment or whatever it is, and so they do not get rerolls to 1. Then he brought this Ghost attachment that has Gazgul and another big mech, so he's got all the custom force fields he needs. And then he's got another Pin Boy so that he can heal Gazgul. One mistake he made is, I pointed this out to him before the beginning of our match. If you look at the custom force field, it's for clan keyword, and so he had his mech guns in this Ghost attachment, and then he had this Death Skulls attachment. So he does get a 6 of them vulnerable, but because his big mech here was a Goth, he did not get the 5-up custom force field save. And so that hurt him a little bit, and so he'll have to switch his list around the next time. So that's his list. Let's see here. Here you see the only picture I had time to take during the game. I talked about this match a little bit on my Facebook page, if you want to go there and see that at Hexfleet Virlist. But basically, I was in a tough position going into the final match here. If I played against anybody else, I would have felt pretty confident about getting another high score win. But with Rich, he's such a good player. He's one of the best players I've ever played against in over 20 years. And Rich and I often are really the only people capable of beating each other at times when, over the years, our codexes have been halfway decent. And so I knew that I was, with the whole major on the line, with us playing on the top table in the 5th round, I knew I was going to have to play super carefully. So did he. It's really unfortunate because both of us have to watch the clock carefully, and it wasn't really an issue for my games. But here, that's what ended up losing me the major, is just I was in a position where I was forced to play super carefully and position super carefully, which Rich is very good at as well, in order to win this game, but then ended up running me out of the clock. And so I'll talk about that in a second. But basically what happened in this game, the entire map was super tactical. This was one of the most intense games I've ever played. We also had Mario, the head TO, watching us the entire game, which I wasn't used to. It was just interesting. And so I had to be careful that it didn't swarm my Blight Lord block with Gazgul and then fight on death, and maybe with his other guy, because he also had that truck where he can get out of the truck with his 4 damage character and attack me. And he had all these smasher guns that could just chip away my Terminators, which they did start to do. So I had a hard time here this game. I had to find good line of sights. I was shooting through a lot of this -1 damage, or -1 to hit rune walls on the top and bottom. He kind of split up his smasher guns, and so I was trying to chip away at them. And one thing that I had to do this game that put me on the back foot, did a lot of damage to me, but did more damage to him, was you can see here, I had to burn up 2 of my Poxwalker squads and very carefully position my Plague Burst crawlers, which really hurt me in a lot of ways. But what that did is, this mission was the diagonal deployment one. That's a little wonky. It was the mission is 33 priority target, and I took the priority target. I took where we stand, we fight, while we stand, we fight, and engage in all fronts. He took engage in all fronts, priority targets, and he also took deploy scramblers. And so my feeling was, if I could just block up my whole diagonal deployment zone the whole game, which you see there marked with some dice, some special color green and red dice, he would not be able to score the 10 points for scramblers, and it would make him harder for him to get engaged in all fronts, which is exactly what happened. And then we had a huge amount of cat and mouse. You see there, I had a squad of Deshrat at the top. I had some that were in the middle bottom, which are currently there in his ruins in the middle there. You can't quite see them because they're similar to the color of his units, but they're next to his surviving big boy squad. I deep struck my some Deshrat Terminators at the bottom. They ended up feeling a charge, which could come back to haunt me later, but did put pressure on there. And so, especially if you look at the top middle where I have the 3 Deshrat on the ruined wall, having them close to my surviving block of like 8 Blight Lords, it put him in a tough position because they're going to threaten that other objective that you see there where he's got some characters and Gretchen on it. If he charges them, then I just kill Gascol with my Blight Lords. And then I'm also putting pressure on him on the bottom. So I'm putting pressure on him everywhere. If he just sits back, I'm just going to start shooting him with Blight Lords and chip away at a smash against my Plague Burst crawlers. I can always throw my surviving Poxwalkers forward to do some mortal wounds. And slowly Gasgul is getting whittled away at. And so I think it was bottom of turn 2, or one of those turns, he took a good 5 minutes just to stop and stare at the table and think, because he realized the position I put him in, where I was just putting him in a vice, and I was slowly killing Rich over the course of the game by putting pressure on him everywhere and making it that he can't just move backwards and hide, but he also, if he comes at me, I'm going to be able to kill Gasgul with some stuff. What does he really have to assault the Deshrat with on either flank? And so I put myself in a position to win the game and deny him secondaries, but I had to position super carefully to do it, especially with how carefully he was positioning. And what that ended up meaning is that neither of us had the time on the clock to get a 5th turn. I would automatically have scored an additional 20 points if the 5th turn had even started. And so that kept me down to 74 points. And then in his last 20 seconds that he had on the clock, when he was almost tabled, he cast a jump on his war boss with the Killer Claw, got it on a really lucky roll, deep struck near that bottom Plague Burst crawler, which was one of my where we stand targets, made an 11 on the charge to get in, so 2 lucky rolls in a row, rolled really well to wounded it 4 times, and then, that would be 12 damage if they all went through with the -1 damage. All I had to do was make one of those 5 feel no pains, and I would keep my where we stand target for an extra 5 battle points. I failed all 4, which is, I don't know, what's that, like a 1 in 90 chance? And then that lost me 5 points. And then between not getting the 20 points for playing the final round, a final turn, and then losing the 5 points there on a string of incredible bad luck, I was down to 69 points as opposed to like 94 points. And he got 55, so I won. But then somehow the other guy that was 5-0, I don't know how he beat up on his opponent so badly, or what that other guy was doing. I think it was a Sisters player, but somehow the other guy, Scott, got a perfect 100, which was exactly enough to, with everything, mine losing at 25 points here, to not win the major by 1 out of 500 battle points. And so that really hurt. That's also what kept me from getting back to the number 1 Death Guard. So that was a really, really bitter pill to swallow. I didn't really have a lot of other options here. I had to play this game the way it was, and it just takes a long time to play against Rich between him being a good player and him playing Orks. And it was a huge heartbreak for me. It took a few days for me to get over how unlucky all that is if you add it all up. But I was very happy to be able to beat Rich and go 5-0 and win that Renaissance Man Award. So those are my games. So if you're curious what happened in the top final game at that major against Rich, that's what happened. There's a lot more in that game, but it gets down to very minute movement of different things. Him burning command points to run away from me on certain things. It's a real heartbreak for me because it was on my bucket list as also to win a major, and this was a great chance for it. And I feel like I should have won. It's just you can't predict for a string of crazy things like that just go against you, and so just nothing I can do about that. But I'm happy for Scott. He's a great player and a really good guy. After the event, he came over to me and said some really nice things like, that sucks. That's really, I don't remember exactly what he said. It's kind of unfair, and he didn't expect it either. It is what it is, but it's really cool. He won with Space Wolves, and so it's nice that he's able to win with an army he's been playing for a long time that he's really loyal to, like I am to my Chaos armies. And so this has been running for about getting close to an hour and a half, but I do want to quickly do what I promised and show you a few other things that I've done with Death Guard this season, and just give you a very quick highlight of some of those matches. I'm not going to go through all those Rogue Trainer tournaments. I don't think that's a good use of your time or my time, and I don't want this episode to be too long. But what I will do is just very quickly throw up a picture of the finals match that I had at those Rogue Trainer tournaments to tell you very quickly, minute or less, what happened there, because I think that might be interesting to some of you, especially so you could see what I did maybe with some different lists. So let me pull that up. I've got all that ready as well. I did a lot of prep work leading up to this. And again, if you're watching this, please, if you haven't already, hit subscribe, share this video, show it to people, share channel with people. It's all free. If you're liking what you're seeing, please help me get some more subscribers. That would be appreciated. And so let me pull up here some of those other lists that I had. So here I'll pull up this one. This is an early one that I had. This I ran at a couple of the early ones. I ran this on an RTT on March 13th, March 27th, and April 10th. This is Ferryman. He's got a Lord of Contagion. He's got the Relic Scythe. He's got the Droning for the movement cutting. Doesn't come up very often, I found out. I got these 2 troops of Plague Marines. They're nice, but they can do actions, which is why I brought them to raise banners. But they're just not very, they don't do much for the points. And that's really, I think, because Games Workshop charges you too much for the Plague Marine weapon upgrades, which is really, really unfortunate because it would be, Plague Marines are supposed to be the heart of the army, and you don't see them largely because I think the weapon options are just too expensive. I still have the same Blight Lords that I talked about earlier. I have Foul Blightspawn and all that. I do have the 2 Blow Drones with Flesh Mowers. I have the 2 Entropy Cannons, and then I have Mortarion. Blow Drones, I have mixed feelings about them. The problem is they are really about at least 10 points too expensive. Not because they don't have good offense, but because they don't have good defense. And I really found this out one time when I charged it into 9 Novax Scarabs. Killed 2 of them because they're really durable for their points. And then they've struck back and killed the Flesh Mower, right? Which you think this little unit that can be OPSEC and move fast and all this other stuff with Scarabs, and it's a swarm unit, it should get killed by a melee dedicated, Demon Engine. But instead, they only lost a little bit, and then they actually struck back with the wounds on 6s automatically and all the extra AP and all the other stuff and just killed the drone. And so that really soured me on them. And they're also not that hard to kill with shooting. And so 135 is just a little too much. I was hoping they would go down in points, and they didn't. Maybe GW never will. And so that's kind of frustrating. But you can see here everything that was in this list. And I'll throw up a picture of it real quick as well, just so you can get an idea of what's in an army like that. Let's see here. So here is this army. You can see there, it's a very low model count. 2 squads of 5 Plague Marines, Lord of Contagion, the 2 characters, 10 Terminators, 2 Plague Burst Crawlers, 2 drones, and then my Mortarion that, of course, I love. But one thing that happened that I should mention of one of the reasons I stopped playing Mortarion is as soon as I started winning some of these RTTs that I ran with this list, and then there happened to be some other Death Guard players in my area, and they like to run Mortarion, so everybody immediately was like, Custom Stompa, Catan, all this stuff that will just kill Mortarion right away, in addition to the usual stuff. And then Drukhari came out, and GW, supposedly without running it by the playtesters, thought it was a good idea to give everybody in the game 3+D3 weapons, usually with rerolls that you can just spam cheaply, like Dollar Groundler Lances or the new AdMech chickens with the Cognos double last cannons for 75 points, which is probably one of the more idiotic things Games Workshop has done, and it's hard to imagine what goes through the minds of the people there, other than they want to sell models for new codexes and that come out. And it is what it is, but it's kind of funny for them to be like, hey, guess what, Death Guard, you're getting some things are getting a little more expensive, but don't worry, you get -1 damage, and then immediately start giving people stuff that will just kill Mortarion or Terminators right away, cheap, spammable, long range with rerolls. And so that's one of the reasons I'm pessimistic on Death Guard going long term into the season, but it is what it is. And so let me pull up some games that I played real quick, just to give you what games were like. Here is one. This was the first one. This was on March 13th. This is the final game I played against AdMech. He's got the dumb copters that I was hoping would get nerfed in new Codex and didn't. So he moved over with one or two of them. He's got another one there. He did some damage and mortal wounds in my back line to my characters, my Blight Lords, Mortarion, Plague Burst Crawler. And then he had these 3 squads of the Riders that everybody hates that can move up pregame and then move. And so he blocked my whole movement. But he got kind of close, and so you can only run away one of those with the stratagem when you get charged to move them again. And so I was able to kill a few and get some movement. I was able to kill both copters between Plague Skull, Foul Blightspawn, Flamethrower, Mortarion charging. So I was kind of stuck in my back corner. But then he moved up on both sides also with some Electro Priests on foot. They gave me a hell of a time on that coin you see in the middle left, fighting over that, and Plague Marines just barely holding out against them. But it ended up, kind of stalling out. And then on the right, he killed a Plague Drone with those Electro Priests, but I was able to use it with Mortarion to get extra movement, move up the board, and just do a little more damage there in his castle in the top right. And in the end, between the Plague Burst Crawler, mortars, and other things doing damage to his 3 little tanks there with the no line of sight firing and all that everybody likes to spam, and Mortarion getting over there doing a little bit of damage, he just ended up losing that. I just ran him out of juice eventually. So I felt fortunate to win that because AdMech was a nightmare even back then, and it's probably even worse now. Then here is the next one. This was my RTT on March 27th. This was against James. James Davis. I mentioned him earlier. He was my second round opponent at the major that I covered a little bit ago. Here I dropped all those things you see in the top left, all those smash guns. I dropped a Blight Bombardment, thinking that probably I would need 1 or 2 extra wounds on each of those smash guns to actually kill them off with the amount of damage that comes from an entropy cannon shot or a mortar. And that's exactly what happened, although it took some work. I took him down. Ended up just being able to kind of claw him off some objectives. He didn't have much at that point to deal with Mortarion. And in the beginning, I kind of shot everything at that flyer, which I didn't even kill it because he made a lot of 5-up saves with the force field, which I don't think should work on flyers, but it does. But it damaged it enough that he then had to explode it near Mortarion rather than going all the way to the other side of the map and attacking my Blight Lords, my characters, which is what he wanted to do. So that was an interesting game. But just shows you a lot of the rounds that I had to play even leading up to the final round were, playing some of the best people in my area when I was playing at the major. This here is the final match that I played with this list in a Rotator tournament. This is the only loss I have this season in an open event, because otherwise I am 19 wins and 1 loss, I think. And this was playing against Marshall, who's the current #1 Necron player. I've beaten him a few times, and so he got used to seeing this list, and he designed his whole list around, he told me, to beat me. It was a very close match. He was spamming the Plasmancers and all that at me, which I hadn't seen before. He had Void Dragon and a Transcendent Catan and the Deceiver. And what ended up happening here is the reason I lost this game is because we played a key thing wrong. And he had just kind of told me he got a ruling earlier from a TO. And so I couldn't really contest it, but I wasn't in that game. But if I looked at it closer, I would have known it was wrong anyway. He misunderstood times arrow. He thought the wounds characteristic goes down, confusing it with wounds remaining. And so times arrow always wounds against whatever your starting wounds characteristic is, but he thought it didn't. And so in this key moment you see here, he then was able to Mortarion, with all the mortal wounds and stuff he did to it, he was covered by a Ferryman Foul Blightspawn. So if he charged his Void Dragon into it, which he had to because that's the only way he could kill it off, I would, or even have a chance to kill it off, is I would probably just kill the Void Dragon with Mortarion fighting first. But then, and I was all set up to do that. I brought my Terminators in the other side on that flank, right above Mortarion. They were unharmed. And then he times arrowed him and said, oh, well, you only have 3 wounds left. And I rolled above that, and so Mortarion's just gone, which is impossible. You can't delete Mortarion or Knights with that. You can't delete it if it has more than 6 wounds. Characteristic. Doesn't matter how hurt it gets. And so he deleted Mortarion with the Catan power I couldn't stop, which was wrong. And then he either switched into it or used a random power thing, got another times arrow to delete my Foul Blightspawn as well, which was also important. Because he had to position his Void Dragon where he still would have been covered by the 12-inch Foul Blightspawn with my Ferryman strat. So instead, he just deleted 2 units, and that was wrong too, because you can delete a Foul Blightspawn with times arrow, but you roll against the wounds characteristic, and he has wounds characteristic of 4. He was injured and had 3 wounds left, and so Marshall rolled a 3, and we said he was gone. So both those guys should have been alive. We did that wrong. That then not only removed those 2 units, but it let then the Void Dragon charge while still getting to fight first into my Blight Lords over there. He used the stratagem to ignore vulnerable saves, killed almost half the unit. That was enough then for him to narrowly win the round. And so if that Blight Lord unit had been at full strength, if Mortarion was still alive, any of those things, that probably would have been enough to win that game. But, it was a good game otherwise, and lesson learned about, knowing those Catan powers well for me and for my opponent. So that was that match. And then... Shogun, yeah, I do play other factions. I have a Necron army I'm building. I have a Tau army. I have a large Space Marine collection, but I'm really interested in playing Chaos. And I have all 4 Chaos Gods for Chaos Demons. I have Death Guard. I have some Thousand Suns, and I have Chaos Knights. I'm about to get a bunch of things commission painted, so there's plenty of there for me to choose from. And my objective anyway is to get best in faction with some army. I'm trying right now for Death Guard because that's one of my big goals. So that was those 3 majors. I'll just wrap up. I'll show you the other list I played at, I'm sorry, not majors, RTTs. I'll show you the other list that I then tried out at another event. Let's see if I can pop this up. So here is another list I tried at an RTT on April 17th. This was Harbingers. The big difference here is that I still had these 2 little Plague Marine squads. I only had 1 squad of Death Shroud, and I brought 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, which was really interesting, and I really enjoyed playing with 3 of them. But that's really the only difference between that and other lists of mine that you've seen so far. If you want to see what that army looks like, let me pull it up. So that's this army. You can see here, similar to what I have otherwise, but you've got the 3 Plague Burst Crawlers there, and you've got just some extra small Plague Marine squads. You've got the 3 Death Shroud. It's a good army. I liked it, but it didn't excel in any one particular thing. Having extra firepower from Plague Burst Crawlers was really nice because I had to play against some tough games at this RTT, where these ended up coming in pretty handy. I'll show you the final game that I played there. Let's see here. That should pop up now. There it is. So, actually, the second game that I played in this event was also worth mentioning. It's against Colin Kay, who's also a top 3 Ork player, and he ran against a bunch of Forge World vehicles from Orks, which are really costed very cheaply for how good they are. And it was very difficult, but having all the Plague Burst Crawlers helped with that, winning that match. It was a very difficult, very close game. But it kind of is why I was considering taking 3 Plague Burst Crawlers for my recent major. But here, I'm playing against Marshall again. This time I do beat him. He made some mistakes about how he was assaulting with the Silent King. I was able to kill the 2 obelisks, and then that removed his ability to really hurt me with shooting. He had tons of warriors and immortals. He had the typical thing of the undercosted scarabs that Necron players like to spam, 3 squads of 9, which caused a lot of problems for my Poxwalkers. And he was able to do a lot of damage with shooting and melee into the Poxwalkers. I was able to wear down his scarabs eventually. He couldn't really defend that well on my one flank. He fought me for it pretty well with all his Lich Guard or warriors and Silent King, but I was able to position better than him, and I had enough damage to finally push him off that middle right objective. I had a good amount of shooting, and then he realized in order to kind of take this game from me, because I did a better job probably of picking secondaries, he had to go take this bottom left objective from me, where I had kind of baited him with some Plague Marines standing out in the open. And so he then deep struck, like a Chronomancer or something, and some warriors on that bottom left objective. You see them fighting over my Poxwalkers, but I had strategic reserves and Poxwalkers, move them into engagement range, because you can do that when they come in from your own board edge. And then I hit him with a Mortal Wound strat and a reroll strat, and so did more damage to him than he expected. He's got some strats with warriors for +1 strength and stuff that makes him hit better too. But I was just able to keep adding guys back to the unit a little faster than he could. And I was just able to keep putting them on the objective to take that objective from him. And then he's not shooting, he's stuck in combat, which is not really what warriors want. So you add all that up, I was able to narrowly win this game as well. And so that was my 4th RTT. And then the last one, it is the same list that I used at the Major, so I'm not going to go over that again. But you see here, this was the only game I've gotten to play since the new Drakari Codex came out. It was a very difficult match. I only had 2 Plague Crawlers here, so it was a little hard to take down his vehicles, but I was just chipping away at them with different things. I was shooting Reaper cannons at vehicles when I could see them, which helped quite a bit. And then I ended up just trading back and forth with Poxwalkers, and so that's one reason I ended up going for this list is, it's very... Dark Eldar are hard to deal with because they trade so well with all their cheap units well. You can trade well with Death Shroud, you can trade well with Poxwalkers under the right circumstances. And so that's what I tried to do here, and I did. I ended up being able just to do enough pressure, do enough damage to kind of keep him off objectives. He ended up moving close to some Death Shroud that ended up doing a lot of damage. And so it was a difficult game, but I ended up being able to move around the board, throw my Blight Lords around at the last minute, just do enough damage to just really wear away at his transports. And so even though the game looked close for quite a while, and he ended up pressuring that bottom right objective with some warriors out of a Venom, at the end of the day, I always just had enough damage to just stay a little bit ahead, because everything in the army could always do something. And that let me get to the point where by the 4th or 5th round, I had almost tabled him. And I was able to pick up a lot of points in the end, and he really couldn't do anything against my Where We Stand, We Fight. And so I also took Random down, which is really against Dark Eldar. I was just picking that up most turns by just slowly taking apart transports of little 5-man units. And so I just did my best to play smart with the list and with these secondaries to take advantage of the few weaknesses that Dark Eldar have, and I was able to do that. So hopefully that gives people a really good idea of different events I've played at and won at, 3 different lists that I've run, some explanations of what I did in my finals games, in my RTTs, and all 5 matches in my major. I played against a wide variety of lists, a wide variety of armies, a wide variety of very good players playing different factions, Orks, Necrons, Custodes, of course, things like Dark Eldar. And so I'm glad that I've been able to prove my skill as a Death Guard player with the new Codex, winning a lot of events, going 19-1 at those open events, and beating a variety of really good best-in-faction opponents. One thing I didn't include here is at one of those RTTs, I think the one that I just showed you, the second round I played against Aaron Nafla, who is a very good player. He's also on my team. He is a number 1 ranked 1,000 Suns player. He ended up getting 3rd at that major with a very high battle score. And so I guess I also have the blessing and the curse at local events that I have to play against a lot of the best in faction players in the world, just even at my local RTTs. And so I really have to bring my A game, which I think puts me in good practice for playing at something like a major or a GT. Doesn't mean I can beat, Nick Nonavati or Sean Naden or something like that, but it does mean I can beat most people. And I'm glad that I was able to show I can win repeatedly and not just with one list. I'm able to keep innovating. There's only so many things you can do with a Codex like Death Guard. It doesn't have a lot of data sheets, but I think this really gave me a good feel for the Codex overall. If you're trying to win with pure Death Guard, which is very difficult, but it can be done, and I've shown it under different circumstances. So I hope that was of value to all the Death Guard players who might be watching. Yeah, Aaron, Aaron's in the chat. I'm looking forward to our rematch. It is difficult for Death Guard to beat Mortal Wound spam with all the changes, unfortunately. It's just another weakness they have now, but with the Poxwalkers, I was able to make it tricky. And Ed, with Plague Burst Crawlers, do you feel there's a case for Spewers? No, I was thinking about this today coming into this chat. Here's the thing about the Spewers for the drones or the Plague Burst Crawlers. They do too little damage for a very expensive platform. Games Workshop really, really, really missed yet another Death Guard opportunity with this Codex when it comes to the Spewers. They would be good if they were 2d3 per spewer instead of d6, but you're not going to spend 130 or 160 points on something that walks up and does 2 or 3 or 4 damage or shots, and then you still have to roll to wound, and it's only AP -1. It's just not worth it. It was worth it a little bit on Plague Burst Crawlers when between the 9th edition coming out and the new Codex coming out, because you could take it on a Plague Burst Crawler as 140 points. So it's like, okay, yeah, you can move it up the board. You could still Flamer in combat. That's not bad. But why would you do that with a 165 point platform? It's not worth it. Games Workshop really did not think that one through. That's why you never see it. It's really disappointing because if you could use that on the drone or the Plague Burst Crawler, it would open up a really different way to play the army, diversify your list. So it's just really unfortunate. Really sad about that. What are you going to do? It should be 2d3 shots to lower your ceiling, your floor of how poorly it can be. Really, to be worth it, I think it should be 3d3 shots. So instead of being an average, 3.5 shots per flamer, it should be average 6 shots, and that would also, make it more likely that you're going to get a minimum of a decent number of shots. And so, Games Workshop I'm disagree with what their design theory there is. I think it's been a D6 since the 8th edition Codex. They phoned it in. They just said, let's keep it at D6, and it doesn't do enough, and it's not reliable enough, and it's too expensive, which is really a shame. So it'd be really cool. It would allow Death Guard to play much more mobile and with some different types of ranged attacks if those were worth taking. They just aren't. Sultry, do I think Terminator list can win against the new AdMech? I'd like to, because really, Death Guard with some of the Demon engines are all too expensive. The generic Chaos Space Marine vehicles aren't good enough. The secondaries aren't good. They don't give a Noxable advance for the extra benefit to the Demon engines anyway, with the way they wrote the Codex. The FAQ took out, made them slow by difficult terrain again. They just have too many things going against them, against an army that's inherently slow and inherently has a lot of restrictions on how you can build your army. Again, that means you can argue, because they also have some good stuff that's a very well-balanced Codex, but it means you're not going to win most of the time against armies that don't have any restrictions or few restrictions or just undercosted or easy to point and click with, which I think AdMech is going to be very easy to just shoot people to death with 75-point core rerolling chickens, Iron Striders, they didn't go down on points that I saw or up on points on their tanks that are a real crutch with the ignore line of sight shooting. They can still do the mortal wounds with the copters. I don't really know what to say about AdMech other than first impressions seems like it's over the top and undercosted, even more so than Drukhari, just with a little less mobility. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see how it goes in the practice, but it seems like Rangers are like the range version of Witches with more benefits because they're 30-inch range and have the extra AP and they can do the mortal wounds on shooting. So it seems like the most undercosted, powerful troop unit in the game is now a Ranger and can take care of hordes or even elite units with some strats. And then the most undercosted, powerful, anti-tank, anti-elite shooting in the game is Iron Striders. with 2 shots at 3 plus D3 damage, core rerolling for 75 points a pop on a unit that I think is like 6 wounds, really hard to kill in one go. And then, of course, you've got all the other stuff, like the Vanguard can put out an insane amount of melee attacks that are really high quality for low points. You can do the killer robots that are super good in melee now. So if you just bring like 13 or 1400 points of Rangers and Iron Striders with character support, and you can build the rest of your army for whatever you want. I don't know if it's an auto-win list, but it's probably even more, it's closer to auto-win than Drukhari. I think Drukhari at least you have to be a little bit careful with, even though you can have a lot of waves of units. You have to still play Drukhari well in order to win a game, even if you've got a big advantage. I don't know that you necessarily need to play AdMech well to win a game. The only thing really keeping people out of AdMech is the fact that the models are very expensive. I'd heard the rumor that Games Workshop did not tell the playtesters that people are going to be getting 3 plus D3, which seems to make sense because a lot like Ravagers or Raiders or Iron Striders, just being able to spam that with rerolls for how little they cost. It doesn't make sense compared to what other things in the game are costed, or even comparable units. Like a Plague Bearers Crawler has 2 of the same guns, but they're not core, they don't get rerolls, and it's 175 points. Whereas you get 2 of them on a rerolling Iron Strider for 75 points. Okay, I mean, there's some differences between units other than that, but in a lot of ways, it just doesn't make sense. Same thing with Raiders or Ravagers. So I think Games Workshop just did what they did, probably not listening to the playtesters, because it's hard to explain otherwise, which is really unfortunate when we are, in a lot of ways, getting the game to be a lot more interesting place with a lot of diversity. So to me, and then you add on top of that things like Sisters getting Miracle Dice for spamming Multi-Meltas, which now they can get reroll once to wound as well with characters, and I don't know what to say. I think it's going to be really hard winning with pure Death Guard, because those are all things that are popular, attractive, easy to spam, reliable with the rerolls, and it will just kill Terminators one shot each. So I think people can spam the anti-Terminator weapon ideal. Games Workshop made their war gear too expensive, so I don't know if that's an answer either. So I don't know if there is an answer right now with Death Guard for what's coming out. I'd like to be more optimistic. That's just my initial opinion. We'll just see how it turns out. I'll be going hopefully to a GT in Vegas soon, Power 9 Games. I'm hoping to be able to go to the SoCal Open. I've never been. I'd like to go to that. And I would like to go to that Warhammer GT event in Austin. I'm really leery of going to something that has a weird format for pairing people rather than using BCP. They said it's worth ITC points. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing if they're doing a funky format. I wish Games Workshop would just get on board and do what everybody else is doing. And then I'm planning to go to the Las Vegas Open. So those are really my only chances to try to get the points I need to improve my top 4 scores that I have right now, in order to win the best infection Death Guard. If I do well at the GT in 2 weeks and I get around 200 points, which really takes first place or maybe second, we'll see. I kind of have to get first or second. If I do, I go back into first place Death Guard and I move into probably number 2 spot in the ITC overall, which I'll get bumped out of by some other players that still need a 6 score as well. But it should be enough for the top 5 and certainly enough for the top 10 for now. So it's really important that I do well at this GT that I have coming up here locally in Lehigh, where I live in Utah. If I don't, I still have another chance to do well at that one in Vegas that I'm hoping to go to. It's a little tricky because it's over Labor Day weekend, which means my wife and I wouldn't get to go take a vacation somewhere else. It's unfortunate that it's on that weekend, but I'm hoping to be able to go. So that's kind of my strategy for the rest of the season. Will D asks, what's the best faction unit to soup into? If I could just, go into a better, easier way to win, I would probably bring Thousand Suns. That's what I used to do in 8th edition. I would play Death Guard Terminators with Thousand Suns when I used to run Combi Plasma, which I've since removed and remodeled on my units. Warp Time and Prescience would immediately give me a huge advantage in a lot of these matchups. I would also like to bring Demons because that solves the problem of just getting leaf blowered by something like Dark Eldar or Rangers from AdMech. Is I could start bringing Nurglings. I could Deep Strike Bloodletters out of reserves. very reliably. I have the models to run a lot of other things, but it's just not possible if I'm trying to run pure Death Guard. And also, Death Guard are very CP intensive, even with the Tallyman giving you a good amount of them. And so when you start bringing the patrols that cost extra, the extra relics, the extra, maybe reserving some stuff from demons, then you start playing with a very limited number of command points. And that also makes it tricky, but it still probably is worth it. I also don't own any Forge World Dreadnoughts, which is a crutch a lot of Death Guard players are relying on because it's too good. Most Death Guard lists, I think, are relying on having those Volkai Contempt Dreadnoughts. I don't have them. It's very tempting to get them if I'm trying to compete at a high level, but I've learned my lesson over time with investing a huge amount of time into a Fire Raptor. Games Workshop will make things too good, and then eventually they'll nerf them, and they'll never become usable again. And I'm sick of chasing, the Forge World stuff. I don't want to build and paint and pay for the painting of a huge Forge World collection of stuff that's just going to get nerfed. I think Games Workshop should just make the codexes themselves good enough that you don't have to use Forge World as a crutch, which the people did in Death Guard in 8th edition and is now happening increasingly in 9th edition, which is a real shame. I think there's a handful of vehicles that just need to be a little bit better in Death Guard Codex, and then it'd be good. And boy, would it have been good if Terminus S didn't, ban all vehicles in Mortarion, because then you could actually do something interesting with that army. But Games Workshop messed that up too. So, they always they get so close to doing it right, making a codex right, and then they fall just short. And then you see other armies like Admech or Drakari who just get everything they ever could have wished and more. And it's frustrating when you play a Chaos army or a balanced army like Death Guard, and then you see other armies get everything, and it just puts you at a disadvantage and pigeonholes you into the number of lists that you can really bring. It's going to be that way, it looks like, at least the rest of the year, because Games Workshop didn't really change any Death Guard points with chapter proofed. There's a small chance they can make things better with an FAQ drop in a week. I don't know. I think you have limited options playing Death Guard, but there are choices. I'm hoping that this episode gave people a little bit to think about. Before I wrap up here, thanks everybody who watched. Please, again, subscribe, share the video around to other people so that I can get some more subscribers and we can get more people on the live chat. If you're not already liking and following the Facebook page, you see the name up there up top, Hexfleet Virulus. Search for it on Facebook. You can also find me on Instagram. On Facebook, we have a lot of good. We have a really good community. I mean, we're approaching 3,000 people who are following my page on Facebook, and so when I post things, there's a big variety of people who post and comment. It's a really good community. At some point, maybe I will start a Patreon and take a little bit of money from that and use that to start a Discord. So we have our own Discord for Hexfleet Virulus and for this show. Other than that, I think I've been going off long enough. It's been almost 2 hours. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope this was worth your time. If it was, subscribe and